right. No. Good morning, Barry.
Good morning.
Oh, why doesn't the sound work now? What the heck? Hold on, Barry.
Sound doesn't work.
There we go. All right.
Okay, well, all right, thank you.
Perfect.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Hi. Good morning. Let's put some light on the subject. Hi. Hi. Good morning. Yes. Beautiful morning today. Bright blue skies. Sun is shining. What's in the news? What's his name? The Star Trek guy, William Shatner, right? William Shatner, you know him?
Space.
From, yeah, he went into space. William Shatner from Star Trek of years ago, Captain Kirk.
He used to come on weekly.
What's that?
He used to come on every week.
Yeah, yeah. He was very popular. Well, now he's 90 years old, right? And yesterday he went into space with a rocket by a private space company run by Jeff Bezos, billionaire, and Jeff Bezos is now taking people up into space. Civilians, anybody can potentially go into space if you probably want to pay $300,000 or $400,000 for the privilege. So you gotta have some bucks to do this. Anyway, it was very interesting that Captain Kirk said when he came back that it was a very unbelievable experience.
I bet.
That he was really overwhelmed by it, and he was trying hard to find the words to describe it. And in particular, he said, when the rocket went through the atmosphere, you know, we have this atmosphere around the Earth. It is the air we breathe, and it extends from the ground up to about 100,000 feet. At 100,000 feet, it's very thin. So it's like a thin. It's compared to the whole Earth. It's like a thin shell around the Earth. So when the rocket went through this shell, all of a sudden it was black as coal out there. It was dark, and you could see the sun and the stars shining in a black sky. And Mr. What is his name? I'll call him Captain Kirk. So Captain Kirk, he said that going through the blue of the air, of the sky, and entering the darkness was the most remarkable thing. And to him, it pointed out how fragile we are, and how wondrous this thing we call our air is, that illuminates the world as well as gives us life. And the wonderful color of the sky is just so comforting, and we need to think about this more. He said we need to really appreciate this sky we have around us, this beautiful, beautiful sky. And so, what do you think about that? Is that interesting? Is that amazing? Is that
Amazing.
Thank you. Yes, it is. It is. You know, the Earth has an atmosphere unlike any other atmosphere on any planet that we know of. For example, if you go to Mars, it's the atmosphere on Mars is very thin. Um, it's it's um, it's mostly carbon dioxide, I believe. Not much oxygen at all, because unlike the Earth, there are no plants on Mars, which were able to. The plants made the air we breathe out of water that they took apart, and they took the hydrogen from the water to make energy for themselves, but they let go the oxygen, or some of the oxygen, into the atmosphere, and that's why we're here. Isn't that interesting? Um, I mean, you know, it took a long millions and millions of years for enough oxygen from our plant brothers and sisters, our plant friends, to enable us to breathe. And it was only, I think, about 600,000 years ago that we reached 9 or 10% oxygen, which encouraged a huge growth in the world's living forms. All sorts of living forms, especially in the oceans, appeared then and have been evolving ever since. So we all life is tied to oxygen. All life is tied to the the air that we breathe. Um, Now we have about 20% oxygen in the air, which enables beings like us to exist, and also things like elephants and birds and frogs and what have you, which all require a high level of oxygen. Most life on the planet that you can see requires a high level of oxygen. So we live with this miracle of plants making oxygen for the living world. Yeah, that's pretty amazing, isn't it?
You know, right? It works for me.
Mm-hmm. So thank you. So we have different relationships with the universe, with the sun, for example. Right? We wouldn't be here without the sun. The sun brings what to us?
Like,
Light, yes, light, warmth, um, colors, you could say. The world is full of colors, full of beautiful colors that come to us through the um, the visible light part of the spectrum, and I'll go into that more in a second. The colors come to us from what we call visible light. What is light? We could ask. Light is a vibration, an energy that's moving in waves. And we have a big number of different kinds of waves and different kinds of light. For example, microwaves, which we use to heat up our food, are a certain kind of light. And we can't see that light. We didn't evolve to see that kind of light. Um, so it's invisible to us, but it certainly works to heat up our food. We have X-rays, right? You've taken X-rays. I've taken X-rays. X-rays are so small that they penetrate the body. That's pretty amazing, right? They go right through the body. You know, light bounces off the body, but X-rays, being very small waves, go right through everything, and that's pretty amazing. So we can see inside the body because of that quality that those light waves have. Now, we can't see X rays either. We can't see ultraviolet light, which is a kind of light that's vibrating too high for us to see. And but bees can see ultraviolet light. And the world looks different to bees because of that. Many flowers have patterns on them that reflect ultraviolet light. And that makes it a visible to bees and maybe other insects, I'm not sure. But humans cannot see that kind of light. Isn't that interesting? That we see particular kinds of light. What else? Radio waves are another kind of light that we cannot see. They're invisible to us. We have radio waves passing through the air right now, right in the room we're sitting in. Radio waves are coming. If you turn on your television or or your radio or whatever, you can pick up radio waves and broadcast, and so there are all, but we cannot see that kind of light. We have telescopes that can, and we can look at the universe in radio waves and see things that we cannot see through ordinary light. Isn't that interesting? The world is a very fascinating place, and how it works is really a wonder. Any questions or comments? So, yesterday actually there was a question about light in my Facebook page, and I'm going to read it to you. I can get this thing to work. Oh. Here we go. Okay, so I have to find this again. Well, anyway, I'll paraphrase what this article was saying. It said that light or colors come to us through light, through the waves of light that reach our eyes. But the waves have no color in themselves, and all the colors we see are an illusion. That's what it said in this article. Now, I took issue with that.
Me too.
Good. What do you think? Are they an illusion?
No,
No, thank you. Why are they not an illusion?
because my mind tells me it's a reality.
Okay, that's a good answer. My mind tells me it's a reality. It is so. The mind is part of this, is part of the equation, right?
You betcha.
You cannot simply say the mind doesn't exist in relationship to the rest of the universe. Or you cannot say the mind is simply making this up on its own and fabricating the world we see around us. Most of the people who responded to this statement that that the colors we see is an illusion were disagreed with that idea. So, and I disagreed with that idea, and it sounds like you guys disagree with it as well. And I think you could look at this picture in a somewhat different way. The word illusion means some sort of trickery, right? Or fakery. That the mind is creating the world and it's a kind of fake picture. But that would mean that all of us are participating in a kind of movie that has no reality to it.
Yeah.
So, but is that so? Or is the brain responding to certain wavelengths of light in a particular way? Is the brain creating the color because the color is inherent in a particular wave of light? There is something about a certain waving of light that has a response in our brains. And it's one of the most remarkable things that the brain interprets the world around us and creates this picture we have of red and blue and orange and green and all the millions of colors that we can see. And it's interesting that we can see millions of colors. Any questions so far? You know, this reminds me of a famous debate between Professor Einstein and Niels Bohr. Now, these are two of the great giants of physics in the last century. And they had a debate once where Niels Bohr claimed that when you don't look at the moon didn't exist in a sense. It wasn't there. It was just invisible wavelengths of light. And he said that it's only because when we look at it that it takes the form it does. And he wondered whether the moon actually disappeared and just resided as wavelengths. Einstein didn't like that idea. He said the moon was always there, and we just had to open our eyes to see it. But physics does tell us some strange things about the universe, such as the world may not exist as we think it does unless we look at it. In fact, the world seems to snap into existence when we look at it. There's a famous experiment called the double slit experiment, and this goes back 200 years. I forget, I'm offhand, I can't remember who started maybe it'll come to me, who the scientist who made this experiment first. What he did was he took a piece of cardboard or something, and he cut two thin slits in the cardboard, and then he shone a beam of light at the cardboard. Now the light made a certain pattern actually was sort of a, well, the light made a certain pattern on the paper, but when you looked at it, it made a different pattern. How is that possible? And thus we can do the same experiment today and we get the same result. A light shown in a paper, for example, will make a certain pattern if we don't look at it, and a different pattern if we do look at it. What does that mean? No one knows. No one knows what that means. No one knows why it works that way. This is one of the great puzzles that science has before it today. How is it that the brain can affect the way light shows itself on a piece of paper? That's pretty extraordinary, isn't it? Which I think is why Niels Bohr said the moon disappears when we don't look at it. It just becomes a mass of waves, invisible. All right, this are the. What is the universe? You know, this is a really interesting universe we live in. I think we're just beginning to understand what this universe is about and how it works. We're just beginning to understand. How the world formed and how life came to be. What a mystery. You know, life is so complicated. Oh, there was something I wanted to read to you. Let me see. Let's see if I have this here. How do the molecules of life arrange themselves among the cell's components? How are they shifted about? How do they communicate so as to synchronize their action? See, life has this ability to communicate and synchronize its activities so that when we digest our food, for example, things move along in precise steps. The food is broken down in the mouth, enzymes or chemicals are added to the food so that they start digesting right in the mouth. And then they continue to digest as they go through the body, and different places in the body digest different parts of our food, such as the proteins or the carbohydrates, the sugars in our food are digested in the stomach or the intestines. So everything proceeds in a very ordered way. And this is one of the real amazing parts about life, how it is so precise, and how things can happen because of the communication that goes on in the cell. Anyway, I want to read a little more. We can now inspect the working cell and at the molecular level, taking measurements and snapshots of molecules going about their business. And so the cell becomes a community. We have about 30 trillion cells in the body. And within each cell is like a community unto itself, with very, very complex working arrangements and processes. Let's see what else. There are checkpoints, mechanisms, safety mechanisms, backup plans, careful record keeping. No human-made mechanism is anything like as sophisticated or as well organized as a cell. So that's a big mouthful. I'll read that again. No human-made mechanism is anything like as sophisticated or as well organized as a cell. So a cell in the body is really like, if you had a fine watch and it had all these parts in it and springs and jewels and mechanisms, and it was a thing of beauty actually as it keeps time. But that watch, as complicated as it is nothing as complicated compared to a cell. Every cell in our body is like a fine watch times 100 or 1,000, and it produces things that a watch cannot produce. A cell can tell time, for example, but a cell can also digest its food. It can repair itself. It can make a new copy of itself. And that is most extraordinary. We don't have any machines that make copies of themselves and repair themselves, right? If you're driving in a car and something goes wrong, the car doesn't repair itself, but the cell does. Most amazing. Any questions or comments? So what William Shatner, Mr. Kirk, Captain Kirk said yesterday was that the world is full of wonder. He didn't use those particular words, but that's what he was getting at, that the world is full of wonder all around us, that somehow we're not aware of it. And so when he went up into space, he suddenly became aware. And many astronauts have said the same thing. As they look down from space upon the Earth, they often remark about how amazingly beautiful the Earth is. The clouds, the oceans, the land masses, all have a great beauty to them, and we live on a living planet. The world is covered in forests and trees and wonderful plants and animals. Any question?
Why?
Why? Thank you. Why? That's a wonderful question. Why do we exist? Why is there this universe that produces something like the Earth? How is it that the basic components, the atoms and molecules, create the world around us and make it possible? We're all made of, we know now for the first time in human history, we know for sure that atoms exist. And we are made of atoms. The whole world is made of atoms. The air we breathe, the ground under our feet, the chair we're sitting on, the clothing on our backs, our beings are all made of atoms. Excuse me.
Right.
This glass of water, the water in the glass is made of atoms. The glass too is made of atoms. Yet these atoms are invisible to us. Even today we have a hard time actually making images of atoms. We know they exist. And we know that the common atoms, the ones that are most abundant in the universe, also make life. How is that possible? How did the universe create these atoms? Why should they have come into being?
Why not?
In the first moment that the universe was born, hydrogen and helium atoms appeared. Now already hydrogen atoms and helium are complex little entities that have many, many different parts, all working in unison with each other to create this little entity we call the hydrogen atom. And then from those hydrogen atoms that were spewed out across the universe, we get stars. Stable forms that put out light and heat over billions of years.
Right.
Why should that be?
No.
You know, they have these stars work in a very complex way. They produce light and heat because of the atoms inside work in particular ways. If they didn't, the stars couldn't exist. That's a really remarkable thing. It's a complex process to produce light and warmth for 1 billion years. Two hydrogen atoms have to collide with each other and form a union where a little bit of energy is given off in the process, and then those two hydrogen atoms have to collide with another pair of hydrogen atoms to make a helium atom, and so more energy is given off. And yet the atoms remain. They don't dissolve, they don't dissipate, they don't become nothing, they remain. And so does the sun. The sun remains as it's doing its work. I mean, what holds it together? Why shouldn't the sun evaporate into the universe? It's just a ball of gas. Why shouldn't it just dissipate out into space? And yet, it's there over billions of years. That's a kind of a miracle, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why ancient peoples worshiped the sun. They thought it was important to worship the sun. That's interesting, I think.
Right.
Any questions? So let me take a step further. The atoms in our body weren't present in the early universe. The atoms in our body came about later on as stars burned and created those atoms. What if they didn't create those atoms? What if the suns just burned hydrogen into helium and that was it? But eventually the burning of stars creates heavier and heavier atoms, up to iron. And most of those atoms are the atoms of life. Those atoms have specific things that they do in the cell to make life possible. They form particular relationships that make the structure of life possible, that make it possible to digest our food, to recreate ourselves over our lifetimes. Every cell in the body has the possibility, not every cell, but most cells in the body have the possibility of recreating themselves. And so we're made anew all the time. Our skin, every 3 or 4 days, our skin is, the top layer of our skin is renewed. Our intestines take a couple of weeks to renew the top layers in the intestine, the outer layers, the inner layers. Virtually every cell in the body is renewed over time, which keeps us alive, which keeps us fresh, keeps us here. An automobile cannot do that. A watch cannot do that. A watch doesn't make copies of itself. Pretty amazing. And all this depends on how atoms work. So we have a kind of underlying matrix or realm of possibility that exists because that's how the universe works. That's how the universe forms. Any questions? Let's read a poem. Here is a poem called June. A single swallow glides in the air above the water. Next to it, something hovers, thin and white. It flies too, or is it floating? It vanishes. It appears again, a little smaller than the bird. Now the bird approaches land. Now it is over the beach. The floating object is also over the beach, a feather. The swallow. Hmm? That's okay. The swallow snaps the feather from the air and holds it in its beak while it takes 3 or 4 rapid strokes forward, and then lets the feather go and glides away.
Like just like that.
All this is repeated maybe a dozen times.
Going in and out.
Is something going on?
No, I think you went in and out.
Oh,
Yeah, I think it's connection, but keep going, Barry.
oh, are we here? Are we here?
I can hear you now.
Okay, finally the swallow ignores the feather, which drifts towards the berms of wild roses, between the dunes and the sea. The swallow climbs higher into the air, blue shoulders pumping hard, Then it swings, glides, turns towards the sea, and is gone. The great mystery is all around us, in the birds, in the air, in the feathers on the bird's back, in the twig that the bird lands on, in the food the bird eats. All around us there are wonders. The world is a great mystery. Captain Kirk said he couldn't get over how amazing it was that the atmosphere went from blue to black in an instant, and that the blue of the air is just a thin covering on the earth, protecting us, nurturing us, enabling life.
Sounds good to me. Me too.
Each moment is filled with wonder and mystery and miracle. Maybe that's why monks go off into monasteries. Maybe that's why people want to live in quiet places.
It is. Oh, no.
There's a poem called Sunflower. What sower walked over earth? Which hands sowed our inner seeds of fire? They went out from his fists like rainbow curves to frozen earth, young loam, hot sand. They will sleep there greedily and drink up our lives and explode it into pieces for the sake of a sunflower that you haven't seen, or a thistle head, or a chrysanthemum. This is by Ralph Jacobson. He further says, let the young rain of tears come. Let the calm hands of grief come. It's not as evil as you think. Each breath we take is a kind of mystery. A kind of wonder. It's just how we are sustained by the very air we're breathing. Isn't that interesting? You can get along for a couple of weeks without food,
I'm fine.
right?
I could-
You can get along for a few days without water,
I couldn't.
right? But you can't get along very long for without air. Only minutes.
It's good.
And so the air is our, you could say the air is our basic food, right? We cannot, if we don't breathe for a few minutes, where it's over. But the air sustains us with our lives, all of our lives. It's always there. Every breath we take renews us. Pretty amazing.
Pretty amazing. I like it.
You know, how wonderful it is to breathe.
I don't know.
Just to sit and breathe. We are connected to the whole universe in a
Yes.
single breath. I want to thank you today for your good listening,
I know.
your good attention, and
Thank you.
oh, you're welcome. You're very welcome. And
Very interesting.
thank you, thank you.
Keep up the good work.
What's that?
Keep up the good work.
Thank you. I'll try. You know, we're just scratching the surface. We're just scratching the surface of what this universe is and how amazing it is.
What do you think we got?
Well, I think it takes time. It takes time for us to appreciate the world we're living in. And so,
I have a question.
yes,
Do you think they'll find a cure for COVID-19? Isn't that what that disease is that's killing up everybody?
that's a great question. Will they find a cure for it? Eventually, I think so.
Uh-huh.
Eventually, I think we'll probably get something like a vaccine that will be for a lifetime and take care of it.
Oh, Dad, go drinking on. Hello? Hello, Barry.
Hello?
You went out for a few minutes.
What's that?
You went off for a few minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't know why that's happening today. Am I back now?
Back now.
Okay. Well, I think we will find a cure for it eventually, as we have for smallpox, for measles, for mumps. You know, you just take a shot now, and you don't get those diseases if you take that shot. So I think
Right.
we will find something for COVID. I don't know how long that's going to take, but at least now we have some protection with the vaccines we have today. And that's important that everybody get vaccinated. And there are a few holdouts in this country that are preventing us from moving forward more quickly. But the important thing is for everybody to get vaccinated. Is there anybody that has not been vaccinated out there in the room today? Have you all been vaccinated?
I've been vaccinated.
Oh, good, good. So that's important, and that will go a long way to keeping us safe. Any other questions?
None.
Okay. Then I want to thank you all for your good patience and listening today. And hopefully we'll see each other again next week, and we'll have more mysteries to talk about.
Next,
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your presence.
ole, ole. See you next week. Ole.
Ole, take care. Be
Ole.
well. Be well, everyone.
Adios. Adios.
Adios. Enjoy the day.
You too. Have a good weekend. Oh, that's us.
Is he done?
He's done.
He said bye?
He said bye.
He said bye? Okay.
What is his name?
His name is Barry.
Barry?
Yeah.